Yo, what is up? Welcome back, and thanks so much for making it this far. So, you want to ride your bike off stuff. In the mountain bike world, that's called riding drops. But in reality, it's just controlled falling. Controlled falling sounds pretty easy until you add a bike to the mix. So I'm going to go into detail about what makes it so darn challenging on a bike. I'm going to talk about some common misconceptions. And of course, I'm going to talk about what I believe is the best method to ride a bike off stuff. And as always, we're going to take this skill to the trail for some real world experiences. So I'm not going to waste any more time, and let's get to riding our bike off stuff. All right, I'm behind the computer. Absolutely no script. We're going to take a look at some video and talk about dropping. What makes dropping so challenging is the fact that our weight is distributed between 2 points. One is actually relatively far in front of the other. We're on bikes, so the idea that these 2 points are going to leave the edge of a drop simultaneously is just not possible. So all the things we do leading up and riding off the drop is handling that fact. Essentially, it comes down to speed and body movements. Speed really impacts the amount of time between your front wheel and your rear wheel leaving the edge. But unfortunately, we can't ride every drop as fast as possible. One of the common methods for handling this challenge is pushing forward or shifting all of your weight to the rear wheel so that your body weight leaves the drop at the last possible moment with your rear wheel. The problem that I have with the push forward and go far back method is the fact that pushing the bike forward and shifting back suddenly really brings your momentum to a stop, as you can see here in this video. And the last thing we want to do is stall out on the edge of a drop. In addition, when you're so far back on the bike, your driving momentum is behind the bottom bracket. And everything we learn in biking is synchronicity with our center of gravity. When you're far back, it makes it very challenging to shift to the right, to the left, or forward should you need to address some unbalances or imbalances in the air. And finally, not all drops in the real world are smooth. A lot of them have bumps or humps as you ride off of them. So when you push forward, it puts your body in a position that makes it very hard to absorb any of those bumps in the lead up to the drop. So with all that being said, there is a place for the aggressive push forward method, and that is if you're going way too slow. It's kind of a last ditch effort to cleanly get off the edge of a drop. And even in that scenario, I would probably learn the pedal drop before just a simple, last minute push to get off the edge. Pedal drops are more of an advanced technique, so I'm not going to cover those in this video. Another common method I see for new riders riding drops is the pop off the drop method. Not only is this method inefficient, but it puts your body in the perfect scenario for a possible dead sailor should you pop crooked. When you're extended above your bike in this manner, it's again very hard to control your drop. You are falling behind your bike, you aren't falling with your bike. Here's the method that I've found works best and offers the most control. So you want to approach the drop high on the bike and forward. Your chin and your chest are over your stem. This will allow you the space needed for the proper motion. What that motion is this. As your front wheel starts to approach the edge, you shift back slightly and quickly. Because we're ahead of neutral position, we aren't shifting far back on our bike. We're simply shifting just past neutral position. What this does is it unweights the front wheel and accelerates its speed off of the edge. As our bottom bracket approaches the edge, we then sink slightly into our bike. What this will do is it'll ensure our center of mass, our weight drives the arc of the drop, and not just simply gravity as we ride off the edge. I should mention that all shifting backward is done with our legs. We are never pushing with our arms. The process of sinking or falling into our bike will actually unweight it as well. One thing to note, our arms are never outstretched. You see, we still have a lot of ability to go forward, back, left, and right from this position. Our arms are very loose for the entirety of this process. As we drop into our bike, our center of gravity drives the bike back down into the transition of the landing. The scoop back movement is controlled, quick, and smooth, but it's intentional. It's not a herky-jerky movement. You really want to master the movement on small drops, because if you can master it on a small drop, it's the exact same movement on a large drop. It just comes down to timing. And finally, as you bring it in for the landing, because you are never far behind neutral position to begin with, as you stand up to absorb the impact, you'll find that it brings your body right back to neutral position, well balanced, right above the bottom bracket. Some people have commented that it looks like I'm popping off the edge. I'm not popping, I'm simply standing up and then sinking into my bike to roll off the edge unweighted and to control my fall. So that motion together may look like a pop. Get out of here, Leaf. All right, so what I found here is a small little drop that could be rolled safely, okay? So that's important because if you get out of sorts on your approach, you still have the option to roll it without committing to an off-balance drop. So droppable rolls typically have a sharper drop-off and a definite point where your wheels will leave the apex of the curve. You really kind of want to avoid trying to drop very gradual rolls just because it makes it more complex in determining when your drop point is. On a roll like this or a drop like this, it's very obvious where our drop point is, right? You can see it in the rock. You really want to give yourself a nice run in just to make sure that you're comfortable on the bike. Your hands are where they need to be, your feet are where they need to be, and your body position is where it needs to be. You don't want to rush any of those aspects. And that kind of goes for any skill that you're working on. So give yourself a good run in. So we're going to approach it nice and slow. We spot our drop. This one has a little bit of a turn into it, which if you're riding natural drops, nothing's going to be perfect like a bike park drop. First things first, we want to make sure that we're hitting it square. So as we come in, we're going to keep that in mind. Feet, hands, and hips are where they need to be. We're coming in, we're going to square it off. We squared it off. And there we go. Okay, we're not pushing back and riding our rear wheel off the drop, okay? That gives us absolutely nowhere to go should our speed be wrong, whether it's too slow or too fast, or, if we go off crooked, we can't do anything back here. When we're just past the neutral position, we can go this way, 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 okay? Just a little drop, so this is where we're practicing this. Just a little pop like that. All it takes is just a little pop. There's no drop that's too small to practice that on. So we can even practice out on this little log here. Now you can safely roll this log. How do you know? Because we're gonna come up and we're gonna measure it with our bottom bracket. Plenty of room there, even if our suspension is squashed. So it's completely safe. Because this little drop has a turn directly after it, we really need to be in the proper position when we land so we can maneuver the turn. Now, if we're too far back, we have no weight on our front, and that makes steering into that turn very difficult. When it comes to drops, it's really important how to read a drop, just like a jump. And the main things you want to know are speed, whether it's a fast drop or a slow drop. And a lot of that is going to come with repetition and experience, which is another reason why you want to start small. Story of my life this time of year. Get out of there. So the other thing you need to consider is whether the drop is a flat drop or an upward drop. Now when I say upward drop, I don't mean a jump or a step down, because if it's a drop and we want to ride it like a drop, then we don't want to pop off of it. So here we are, another small drop. But this one you read a little differently. While it's small and you can roll it, if you're coming through with some speed, it becomes an absolute drop. It's not your typical drop where it's just a sheer drop off. This is more of a rolling drop off. So we want to still handle it though with our proper dropping technique. But because we read this one as an uphill drop, we need to think about one other aspect, okay? We're going to come in, we're going to be very loose, we're going to be just slightly ahead of neutral position. So remember how I said approach a drop high on the bike and just in front of neutral position? This gives us all that movement we need to absorb this. We're gonna let the bike come into us, okay? We're gonna let the bike come up into our body. So we're going to absorb as much of this uphill transition as we can. So as we absorb it, our head is still looking forward, our bike comes up into our body, and then we do our drop technique, our typical drop technique. So here we have what is another drop without a definitive edge. So we need to figure out where that edge is. And by looking at it, it's going to be right around in here. As we look at it, coming in as a rider, it's a little bit uphill. So we know we have to absorb it a little bit. So now we know we have to deal with absorption of forces coming up into us. And we also know, because we have a good foundational drop technique, that we make sure we're in our neutral position when we land, because we have a very loose turn right here. Okay, and it's made looser by these leaves. You can see the skid mark. Somebody wasn't prepared for the turn. They were either coming in too fast or didn't drop right and just blasted right through here. Thankfully, there's not a 5,000 foot cliff right there, so all is well. So as we're coming in, we want to look ahead of the drop so we know what's coming after it. We want to look at the drop. We need to absorb it, so we're going to absorb it. We're going to let the bike come into us. We're going to go slightly back and then right back to neutral position and let our body fall into the bike a little bit. Okay, that's going to really have our center of gravity and the center of gravity of our bike become synchronized. We're going to come down and we're going to land it strong, balanced, so that we need to do whatever we have to do with the body bike separation to get around this turn. So let's do it. Quick time out here. These small drops here that we are practicing our drop technique on, that we can roll, I just want to say that this is just for building your drop technique. In most instances on a trail, when you're riding something that you can roll, you actually want to push down through it to get your wheels back on the ground as soon as possible. So please don't assume that you want to drop all these little things. That's not the case here. We're just practicing a drop technique in the most safe way we can. But like I said, in most cases, stuff like this, you want to ride, you want to push through it, push your bike back down to the ground and get that traction back as soon as possible. So here's a drop that is a great example of a natural drop where you really have to read the environment, okay? So once you have those basic drop technique skills, you then have to add all these other environmental factors into it to make sure that you still can achieve that foundational skill set that you have. First, you have to make sure that your shoe is tied. So to read this small drop, it really starts from way back here. Okay, so this is where I'm going to come into it, and this is where the factors are going to start interacting with me to try to get me off of my foundational drop technique, that base technique. And I don't want to let that happen, so I have to have a plan here. So I know as I come in, I got to do some juking and jiving to square up for the drop, because we know we have to ride a drop square. So I have to have a plan for that. So I'm going to come over here, then I'm going to come over here, and I have to understand that plan. And I can't black out on that plan and just focus on the drop, because if I do this wrong, then that translates to the next step, which is getting up under the rock, which translates to the next step is doing the drop poorly. We don't want that to happen. So we need to first focus on the approach to the drop. Okay, so we have that figured out. If we have to practice it, we're going to practice it, okay? Just so that it's not fresh to us, so that we know what to expect. So we'll practice that. Practice getting up onto the rock here, okay? So we're up on it, and we have to know our line out of it. So we know we have to hit it square, and hitting it square will leave a certain line for us. So we have a little rock over there. We know we don't want to land on the edge of that, because that can do bad things to our rim and tire. So we know we want to stay centered or slightly to the left. So as we come into this, we're going to make sure we can get around that rock and up onto this rock and get square. So once you got that all practiced out and know that you're confident doing that, it's time that we're going to commit to the drop. There needs to be a point where we know we're going to commit and we're not going to back out. At that point, in all honesty, it's you prepare to be ready for that point. And when you're at that point, you're on a roller coaster. Okay, the harness is down, it's going up the hill. You can't get out of it, okay? You have to commit to it, and you have to do the best with whatever situation that you're in. Because the worst thing that can happen is when you panic and break and skid off a drop, or try to bail out off a drop, you know, etc. All right, so let's do it. Square up. There we go. Right back to our neutral position so that we can handle all that stuff that came after it. So that's what I would consider a slower drop, though not so slow that I had to pedal drop off of it. I won't get into pedal drops, but they are super slow drops, and having that ability is perfect in the worst case scenario. So we'll talk about pedal drops, not in this video, but in another video. So speed is a very hard thing to coach via YouTube when it comes to drops, and that is why I would always recommend hiring a coach for all this sort of stuff. You know, these videos are great, but nothing beats in-person coaching because they can tell you exactly what you're doing wrong in person in real time. You may feel like you're doing something completely right. It might feel right for your body, but when you look at it from, you know, another person's point of view, you're actually not doing what you think you're doing. So a coach can tell you that right away and help you correct that, and help you correct it consistently to build good habits, right? And remind you of those inconsistencies that you may be doing. In addition, when it comes to speed on drops, you know, in a video, all I can tell you is it just comes with experience. You know, you just have to ride and learn how to read a drop for speed. Some drops will be slow and you're gonna have to learn how to slow drop just because you can't ride into it with speed. But bike park drops and whatnot, there's often a variable speeds that you can hit that stuff with. That's where a coach comes in and can help you out tremendously. That is where I can't help you here on YouTube. All I can say is ride your bike, gain experience on the small stuff. That experience will make it easier to translate to the bigger stuff, and then it becomes a snowball, and then before you know it, you'll be on the big stuff and you'll be completely confident knowing how to read drops and whatnot. So this doesn't take the place of good coaching,